first feature film, right?
Yes, it's my first feature film. You have to ask me another question.
Yeah, so we're going to be doing a Q&A, so I encourage you all who have questions to please just raise your hands. We'll try to have a few questions. I think we have 20 minutes, so that should be enough time. So please, if you have questions, ask. But just to begin with, I would like to ask you, because I'm very fascinated by the story. It's a very fascinating story, and this is your first feature film. So I'm just curious, how did you come across this story, and what was it that made you want to do a full film about it?
Yeah, I mean, for a first feature film, this idea was, initially it was way too big for me. When I first heard about Eismayer and that he got married, I read it in a newspaper article. So that's when I got the idea. But the first time I encountered the name Eismayer was when I was in the army, like 20 years ago in Austria. And there were all kinds of stories about him, like in a movie, like he, blew up a cow with a bazooka and stuff like that. So we were all really afraid. And that this, in addition to he married a guy at the barracks in Vienna, was really interesting for me, but I thought it's way too big. But in the end, I needed a catchy idea, to pitch it to some producers, and I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna pitch it, like what can happen? Like, the worst that could happen is they say, okay, it's a great story, and then, I have to figure out the rest. But yeah, then I had to figure out the rest, which was making the whole movie. Yeah.
And did you get the chance in the process to meet Eismayer and his husband and get to research it like that, or?
Yes, yeah, that was extremely important for me. I didn't want to make up anything, So I took all my, my courage, and I called this guy. I got his number through a friend, and then and he invited me home for dinner. Also, like a little bit like in a movie, like cooked for me. And I sat there, and I was like, now, and then he was just checking me out, to see if he can trust me. And once he trusted me, he was talking for hours and hours and hours, and I had beer and beer and beer. In the end, I went home and was like, oh, this is amazing, I have to make a movie about him, because now I understand him better, So, and another question that also often comes next is like how my actors prepared themselves to be them, which is always tricky if you have to, as an actor or an actress, if you have to live up to people that exist in real life. It's very tricky, because you cannot copy paste the person. So I just made sure that they would spend time together and get to know each other really well. And then Gerhard and Luca, which played Eismayer and Mario, they create their own kind of version of those characters. Because in the end, it's a fictional story we did. I tweaked a lot, and and so that's how we worked with Eismayer and Mario.
Yeah, that's super cool. I think, and yeah, it is a very fascinating story, and also because being gay or being queer in the army, it's very frowned upon. So showing it in that light, I think it's a beautiful way to represent it. Are there any questions from the audience? Yeah?
Yeah, I would like to know, thank you for everything. I want to know, because I guess there was a lot of material to work with, and I found it quite interesting how you jumped through their story, and I wonder, like, I felt not like jumping, it felt very organically, but I just wanted to know, how did you choose these, like, excerpts of their story, and yeah, how did you work with transitioning them like that?
Okay, that's a very good question. I hope I have a good answer. How I did it, it was a lot of pain, actually, a lot of trial and error. The original if you want to call it a story, the original facts that happened from they got to know each other until they got married, it was a time span of 15 years actually. So there was a lot more than what was in the movie, and also with his family and his wife and his son. And it was a very hard process to, you know, like really focus on actually the love story between those two. That was my main goal. And that helped me like let go of other parts I really loved and I really found interesting, but at some point I couldn't make it into a movie. It would have been a series or something. But yeah, I had to let go a lot, and it was tricky. It was really tricky. I don't know how I did it. I just, you know, by the time.
Had you already figured it out in the script stage, or was it also not an editing in the end?
It was both. I mean, like 2 weeks before shooting or 3 weeks before shooting, I just ripped out 15 pages of the script because I realized it's not going to happen like that. Then we shot it like this, and then in the editing process also I get rid of a handful of scenes, actually, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, hi, thank you for the film. I really enjoyed it. I was curious to know more about how you're using the symbol of trees and the images in between. What's the idea behind it?
The trees.
Yeah, and the still images, like with kind of.
Yeah, the trees and the buildings.
Yeah.
This was the location that was also in the end of the movie where they meet again. It was the same location. It was a kind of a military training ground, and we went back there in winter because I still wanted to shoot some, you know, like just images that have no dialogue, that just give us space to reflect on what's happening. And I was just searching for something there. And what I really liked about these structures and the nature, that is kind of, you know, fighting for space there. For me, was like that it spoke to me in terms of, you know, like Eismayer has a very kind of rigid and hard shell, and you had these buildings there, and they were crumbling, and nature just found a way to grow out of this, and this, I just loved it, you know, and actually I had no idea by the time where exactly in the movie I would use that, but I was like just filming it, like, yeah, let's do this, let's do that, and I don't know, you know, and we had several versions in editing where it didn't work at all, and in the end, somehow it clicked. And I liked it, like we used it in the end. It was, yeah, it was also like kind of an experiment for me.
You kind of bring a story into those images as well, like because it evolves throughout the film.
Yeah, and
It's the house in the beginning, and then it's outside in the end.
exactly, yeah. Thank you for seeing that.
Yeah, but I just asked another question. How many scripts did you go through when you were ready?
26.
Okay.
It's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, good job. Well done. More questions from the audience? Yep.
I found the performances to be extremely good. When you were working with the actors, how close did you want them to be? Like, how did you create that sort of chemistry between them? Did they know get to know the real persons?
Yes, they got to know the real versions, but not too close, you know, like it's tricky because the actors, I know they are really very, very sensitive and open people, and so they try to suck in everything they find. And at some point they realize they just can't, you know, like copy it 100%, and then they get insecure, and then you have a mess, you know. So it was kind of more like an inspiration, and especially Gerhard, he just copied some gestures from Eismayer, like, you know, when he's saluting, he's always, you know, like spreading his little finger like this a little bit, you know, like that was some tiny things he just copied, but the rest he took out of himself. And as the performance goes, what I realized is that I can work best with actors and I get the most out of them when I'm not, directing from outside to the inside, but from inside out, like not non-directive orders. So I'm not telling him, you have to, I don't know, smile a little bit more or be more angry or something like that, but just try to work on the reason what's happening right now, like how he gets there, what does he want, what does he need, and if you have good actors, then they would do a great job. And for the chemistry between them, that's casting. I mean, you have to find people that just fit together. And with those two guys, I had a feeling in the casting that there is something, like something I cannot produce as a director. I cannot tell him something to, let's create the magic there. Now, a little bit more magic. No, it just has to be something in between those two guys, and they had it. So I decided to use them as a couple in the end.
Yeah, just a little follow-up from that question, because it's very interesting. This is not just a story and not just a love story. This is a queer love story, and it's a very delicate matter because like the representation for queer people in movies and in films is very important. And I think you handle it very respectfully, and it's done in a beautiful way. So how did you find that aspect of making the film, like the aspect of the queerness of the film? Because that's it's a factor, of course, in every love story that's from the LGBT community. Did you focus on that in some sort of way, or when you were writing, or how did it come to you?
This actually came out of the facts of the real Eismayer, the real Mario, because what fascinated me was that if you look at it like the newspapers did, it's a rom-com. It's just this kind of really cheesy rom-com of two guys, and then he's like coming out of the closet and they get married in the barracks and everything's fine, And when I got to meet the guys, then I realized I've never met men like those two guys, and they even got married. I mean, this was a gay love story I've never heard or seen before in terms of the characters, because they are so special and so weird. These two guys are really, really weird together, and I love them for being that kind of weird and also hard and soft, and they just it opened up my mind a lot, and that's what inspired me to always be with my characters and just let them do what they do, and watching them and being with them and feeling with them. I wasn't thinking so much. The only thing I was thinking was I didn't want to reproduce any cliches or tropes that we already know, other than the the genre kind of this rom-com kind of a happy ending I just wrote because it's so funny, to put them in a situation like that. But I just wanted to, I don't know, see something I've never seen before.
And also the happy ending, I think that's great, because there are so many films in the LGBT section that end with a horrible ending. So this is just, I think it's very great that it ended with a good ending. Yeah. Oh, yeah, 5 minutes. Okay. More questions from the audience? Yeah.
Did actually, did they both see the movie?
Yeah, they saw the movie. This was one of the most beautiful and most strange moments in my life. When the film premiered in Venice, they were there, and they were sitting in the middle of the audience, and they had their uniforms on, exactly the white ones, And then they saw it for the first time. I mean, they saw a kind of final cut on their computer half a year ago or something like that, but without grading, without sound editing, without music, without anything. And then they saw this, their story, kind of. And when the movie ended, like the titles went up, but everybody was applauding, and so they turned on the lights, and then those two guys, they just stood up, stood up and didn't know what to do, so they just saluted, and everybody was like, yeah. And then they were crying, and then I was crying, and then like everybody was crying suddenly, and it was so beautiful because, I think they didn't really got accepted until now. I think they got tolerated, which is shit, And now they are not even being accepted, they are like celebrated for what they did. And this was, for them, it was crazy. And for me, I just felt with them, so it was, they saw it, no.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I think we have time for one more question, if anyone has a question. I think the mic will shut itself off in like a minute or so. But if you have any more questions, anybody? No? Okay. But then again, I think, it's just as a member of the queer community, I think it's just a very beautiful story. It's told in a beautiful way, so I think we can just thank you for making this film, because it tells a beautiful story in a beautiful way.
Thank you so much for watching the movie.